Hello, this is Dimitri. I'm going to do something unusual today for myself, not altogether uncommon as a filmmaker, and I'm going to do a little vlog, a little bit of a review. I am presently playing Nier Automata, a very interesting game, a very fascinating game that's kept me involved, both intellectually and emotionally, though I have to say, there's a little bit of a disconnect, I feel, a little bit of a schizophrenia about playing this game, because to the same extent that I'm involved in it, emotionally, I feel confused by it intellectually, and I'm not entirely sure if the developers have reconciled me yet, but I hope that by the end of at least the first playthrough, and as I understand there are 26 different endings, I'll have some sort of closure. What this game is interesting in is it's interesting insofar as there are no human beings in it. However, there are humanoids. And there are androids and there are machines. Now, obviously, an android falls under the classification of a machine customarily, but in this particular apocalyptic age, really very, very post-apocalyptic, many thousands of years into the future, the machines, essentially, androids and machines are regarded as two different races, and the distinction between them is twofold. One is that machines are for the most part clunky pieces of equipment that kind of look like R2-D2, but just more dark brown with on-center eyeballs and appendages. And yet, and the androids are humanoid. The androids are your idealized human beings, very, very beautiful and slender and extremely efficient as fighters. And the key distinction between them is that the androids are the ones serving humanity. However, we're not entirely sure how much of humanity is left because we don't see any human beings in this. The closest thing we see to a human being turns out to be a sort of an android that was given birth to by these machines. And that's an interesting transition to note that the machines are essentially presented as being in many ways more human than the androids. And the chief protagonist is an android named 2B, who is extremely, extremely mechanical, hyper-pragmatic, very programmed in this way of fighting a war on behalf of humanity, yet it's a war against the machines, and who are very human, very recognizably human in their behaviors, and it's in service to an organization that claims to glorify mankind, but is actually, from a human perspective, very impersonal and very authoritarian. What's fascinating is also that when you reach, and I have to specify that this is fascinating because I'm not trying to sell you on this, I'm trying to express what I'm feeling here so that you know that you can expect this feeling, but I have no personal I have no personal interest in selling you this game, so to speak, or persuading you. But what is very fascinating about this, keep in mind, I don't have any utility in making this video, and this is a very important point. What is fascinating about this game is when you reach a village where all of the machines are essentially living together in peace and harmony, and they don't want war, and they welcome you. They welcome you as not so much as a savior, but as a visitor, as someone who could be one of them, and is respected as at once as an outsider and also as an insider in a certain manner of speaking. There's a very humane machines in this. There's a little sister looking for her big sister. Actually, it's an older sister looking for her little sister who's bigger than she is. There's a machine who has acquired another part that makes him stand up taller. So now he feels like he's really cool, or she feels like she's really cool. I guess women tend to in our society tend to do that when they wear high heels, but it's ironical because this is exactly the type of machine that we have to slash through once they get tall enough and wear them down till we can bust them into pieces. There's a big machine who says he's tough, but he's really soft on the inside. There's a scientist machine somewhere off there who's trying to peddle off his inventions, but really it looks like he's just giving you stuff that you find lying around ordinarily. He's just peddling it off for a lot of money, and you just keep investing in him if you so choose because you're curious intellectually about what he might come up with. And there's a philosopher machine. And this is the key thing that I found interesting. The philosopher's name is Jean-Paul, and from the very outset, he presents the philosophical question, does existence precede essence? And 2B has nothing in her programming that answers this question for her. Neither does her accomplice 9S, who's kind of her love interest, which is also strange. It's strange to see a robot, to play as a robot in very human situations, and kind of root for the human side of her, when she's not recognizably human. You expect human beings to have some sort of a soul or something in their biology, something that makes them distinctly human, other than what they do. And here's this machine who's asking if existence precedes essence. And if you know anything at all about philosophy, you know how this is the most relevant question to the game. Because the game has a question. The game has the overlying mystifying question of, are they humans or are they machines? The machines seem to think that they're human, or act like they're human, and the androids seem to believe, they've been programmed to believe that they're serving humanity. But what makes any of these beings human or even conducive to human purposes? Well, if existence doesn't precede essence, or existence does precede essence, I mean. Well, okay, if existence doesn't precede essence, then human beings are essentially human, and robots are not, because they're designed by human beings for a human purpose. But then, if existence does precede essence, then human beings are only human insofar as they act that way, which implies that even a machine who's designed by a human and essentialized by a human and made to serve human purposes, like the penknife from Jean-Paul Sartre's example, because Jean-Paul Sartre is the philosopher that Jean-Paul the robot is based on. And incidentally, even the word robot is probably not the best word, because a robot means technically something that was designed to work, so like a slave, except a mechanical slave. But this machine asks the question, is it not possible that we're more than penknives, that despite what our creators intended for us, we can become human? This is what was implied by the question. There's no way around that. That's common sense. That's obvious. The connection should be obvious to anyone familiar with existential philosophy. But what's puzzling about this character of Jean-Paul is, just as you reach Jean-Paul and you think, this is where the story is going to start making sense. This is the turning point. And he gives you a mission, and you can't elect to reject this mission. There's soon thereafter a disappointment. Because initially when 2B approaches Jean-Paul, she's confused by him and annoyed by him. And that's what you would expect. And this is a Japanese game. Japanese were a great debt to Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism in turn developed out of Taoism. In the Taoist text, the I Ching, it was suggested, I am not the one who seeks the young fool. The young fool seeks me. I can reference that in a car with someone who's well read, and she'll instantly recognize that's the I Ching. It's hexagram 4, right? It's in Philip K. Dick's books. It's been around for thousands of years and has shaped Chinese culture and everything that we've gotten from it. So you kind of get this notion in all these ancient Zen stories of a disciple and a teacher. And the disciple is originally a fool, but this disciple seeks out the teacher, and this teacher is just standing there, or sitting there, and at first the disciple is just, how should you say it? Again, this isn't verbal filler. When I say I do mean that you know this, as opposed to something that I have to convey to you. No utility here, remember. I am still recovering from my debater days, when utilitarianism just did to philosophy what to be is about to do to philosophy. Whether we are to be or not to be that, I don't know. The point is that Jean-Paul Sartre's philosophy is applied in this world in a way that falls on deaf ears. See, the is to be. I don't mean to be or not to be. I mean to be. The fool is the character who seeks out Jean-Paul and discovers him and is indignant and is frustrated and is dismissive of his wisdom. This is the position that 2B is in. But normally, the way that these stories go is that over time, she comes to recognize what he was getting at. And she wakes up. She becomes enlightened. She becomes the master or mistress. Well, not mistress in that sense that you might imagine, which I'll get to in a moment, the romantic sense. But she will become an agent of the truth, or someone initiated into the school of pursuing the truth, or creating the truth, or, creating the ethic, whatever the case may be. With me so far, right? Of course. So, Jean-Paul is a relatably human character. Everything he does, everything he references just makes so much sense. A lot of it is direct quotations from Jean-Paul Sartre, or from Hume, or someone, maybe it was Hegel. So whoever refused to answer the disciples' question, because that's not his job. His job is to explore the truth, not to just explain it to whoever wants it. Because he doesn't claim to have all the answers. He's just clearly the most knowledgeable in philosophical matters of any of the machines. And he is at peace with the paradox of his situation. He is detached from his disciples, a great deal of whom are women that admire him, much as a great deal of women admired Jean-Paul Sartre, as you would expect in any civilized society. And I'm not meaning to say by this, and this is an important point that I've even written down, I don't mean to say by this that the only intent, the only goal, the only worthwhile purpose of becoming a philosopher is to court women, as philosophy itself moves away from that way of thinking, and that way of thinking does haunt a lot of other industries which should be informed by a higher purpose, but nevertheless, it's hard to imagine any philosopher, male or female or mechanical, who having concluded that pursuing sexual interactions and romantic relationships is worthwhile, would not be able to do it. It doesn't click. It just seems like I think maybe we've been programmed this way. I just don't see a philosopher being an unattractive person. In fact, being philosophical in a woman is one of the most attractive things that I can think of, personally. Especially in addition to any of the more banal things that makes a woman great. Banal things that make a woman great. See the paradox right there. So it's puzzling because you end up going on a series of missions where you have to, admittedly, you can opt out of them, but you're still signed up for them, so to speak. And the weird thing is that you can opt out of them because they don't seem to move the story along. But you seek out these women in these distant reaches of the world, and they have these gifts to present him with, but he's not satisfied with those gifts because they're too material. They're not intellectual gifts. They're just trinkets. Jean-Paul Sartre himself renounced possessions for the most part. He owned his pipe, and that was about it. His pipe and a few books. He was a Marxist. So, but what's annoying is that through this process, at every point, 2B reacts with such sarcasm that you don't feel like she's a student who is learning and you're rooting for her to learn and to figure it out. And meanwhile, you figure it out. No, you just feel like, this woman, I'm not sure that I want to play with her. I'm not sure that I want to play as her, for that matter. I'm not sure that she's human enough, because a human being would be asking these philosophical questions and trying to provide an answer for them. And using this as an opportunity to learn from someone who is respected by the village as the archetype of the wise old man. And obviously there's no reason why a woman couldn't learn from that and become a wise woman. That would be a very human-hearted story that would help one orient oneself in one's society and understand the context of this war that we're supposed to be having with the machines, even though we know that we're actually collaborating with them. And maybe we're not so different from them after all. I mean, this was even in the trailer for the game that is included within the game itself. If you just wait at the start menu, you can watch this trailer. A few bits of dialogue or monologue that are there. There are two antagonists in the game who say, perhaps we're not so different after all, and you don't even realize until after you've gotten to the point where you fight them that they're antagonists. Spoiler warning, I'm sorry. So, it's puzzling. It's very strange. Because I can understand 2B's perspective to begin with. I can understand that she's been programmed in a utilitarian, militaristic way. In the way that a lot of Americans, especially a lot of Americans in the military, of which a lot of Americans are, in the military, she's been programmed in this American fashion. You know, utilitarianism, the notion that everything is supposed to serve a purpose, but not a philosophical purpose, not a teleological purpose, but just a result, a series of arbitrary results. That's an American way of thinking. And at first, if she's a satire of like the American military, for instance, you can see why. And I don't mean this as verbal filler. I don't mean that. I mean literally, you can see why. That's a fact. You can see why she would be dismissive. Because she's been programmed to be a utilitarian, and utilitarianism is a philosophy that's a dead end. It's a dogma. She's not only against a philosophy that doesn't serve a purpose. She's not only against any philosophy that doesn't serve her purpose or a purpose. No, she's against philosophy in general, on principle, because she's not aware that her utilitarianism is also a form of philosophical programming. And philosophy is a way of not only programming people, but deprogramming them. But the problem with utilitarianism, it's like a while loop that's infinite. You just get stuck in it because you have to dismiss anything that does serve a utilitarian purpose. And furthermore, you have to dismiss any philosophy that doesn't have utility for utilitarianism in itself as a philosophical school. And yet, because you presuppose utilitarianism, since it is useful to do so, that it is not a philosophy but a matter of fact, even rather than a matter of ethic, then you dismiss all philosophy, not even knowing that you're still using it. Using philosophy, using a particular strain of philosophy at the expense of all other ways of philosophical thinking. And to just the very tip of the iceberg, the very cherry at the top of this horrifying sundae of confusion, is this notion that, let's see, being wistful right now. It's this notion that you can, at any moment, shed your anti-intellectualism and say, in fact, that you respect philosophy to an extent. So at any moment, you can say, once you've found a philosophy that you can use, but that you can't deny that it is philosophy, you can claim, for your own utilitarian benefit, that you respect that philosophy. And yet, at the moment it seeks to serve your purposes, you cease to be a philosopher. You cease to be philosophical in your persona, and it shows that you were never really philosophical to begin with, except as a hypocrite. Except as someone who is using the philosophy of utilitarianism which is greatest good for the greatest number of people, the greatest good for the greatest number of human beings. Well, we don't even know if there are any human beings left at this point in the world. At least I don't know yet. I haven't gotten to that point in the game yet. And it's funny because this mission is called Jean-Paul's Melancholy. And it seems like a satire, right? Why is he so melancholy? You know, he's Jean-Paul. He's so well known and so respected for seemingly nothing. Because from 2B's perspective, it is just nothing. It's not everything. It is not all of existence. It's not like from 2B's perspective, this game becomes this village, this place becomes so much more beautiful and appreciated because we don't take it for granted, because we don't reduce it to utility, because we experience it as human beings. No. It's useless, and you think, why would he be melancholy? Why would he be sad? Of course, Jean-Paul Sartre himself was not sad. He was depressing, but he wasn't himself depressed, because he was secure in his convictions, however wrong a lot of them might have been. But this robot is a lot more relatable than probably the actual Jean-Paul Sartre would have been. And yet, what is the melancholy? The melancholy is 2B never really seems to respect him. She never seems to actually see what the big deal is about him. It's very peculiar. It's like the android doesn't comprehend human emotions that human females have felt historically time and time again for people who are intellectual. Because it doesn't have utility. Now, admittedly, in this way she's a lot like an American woman. But you have to wonder, is it not possible that as Japan is becoming more Americanized, that the people who developed this game, and I know this is kind of insulting of me to suggest, at least offensive, maybe not deliberately insulting, not deliberately offensive, but it's not possible that they agree with her. Now, if they do, that doesn't have there's no utility to having Jean-Paul Sartre in the game. Because no one intellectual, no one with that kind of social standing, no one with any social standing in a society, except for in a fascist anti-intellectual society, would laugh at your satire. It would just confuse them about why people are treating Jean-Paul like crap. And why they think that he's treating them like crap when really he has a justification for everything that he does. It's totally self-evident. A person with a lot of respect in a society worthy of respect, in a reasonable society, and I'm not just saying this arbitrarily. There are criteria by which to prove this. It's not just like I'm trying to earn respect by claiming entitlement to it, as though thousands of people before me hadn't come to the same conclusions about what it means to be a respectable society. Because obviously, an individual can't be self-respecting if he or she strives for respect in an unrespectable society. But he or she can determine the society to be respectful or not to be respectful, to be or not to be, and then derive respect from that. And it's not like you start by demanding respect from others and then you tell society how they should be, nor is it that you simply arbitrarily respect yourself and derive from that notions of what it means to be respectful. No, there's a tradition. There's a human tradition of what these things are. And in this post-apocalyptic world, Jean-Paul is seemingly the only person who possesses that tradition. And his followers love him for that. But he's also a non-playable character that if you want, you could chop to bits. And maybe he'll come back if you reload the level. If you leave for a while and come back, maybe he'll be back, because a lot of the non-playable characters you can interact with that are not just hostile units can do that. But this is a look in our world, in the real world. If this were satire, most people wouldn't laugh at it. They'd wonder why he's being treated this way by 2B and by this beautiful android and by the game itself. It just wouldn't click. However, that being said, if it's not a satire, of Jean-Paul or Jean-Paul Sartre or the human instinct to be philosophical, or the human instinct to pursue someone romantically for philosophical reasons or anything like that, then that makes a little more sense. Because that's something that, as a human being, as a human player, as someone who goes to games in order to learn something about the human condition, I can get behind. I can understand the where not only where this works for me emotionally, but where it fits into a larger social picture. I could see how 2B's anti-intellectualism is very typical of someone working for a military state, and how she might, and there's a warning against that sort of anti-intellectualism. But there's always, as Foucault said, there's an inclination towards fascism in people. There is a fear, a primordial fear that maybe 2B is right. That maybe she represents, and not that she's right philosophically, but that she because her philosophy, as I said, excludes philosophy. But it seems like she, and it's hardly the be-all and end-all, but she seems to, there's a fear that she represents what the creators of the game themselves believed. And that as someone who plays this game, you have to conform to that point of view, because they are representing something that a great deal of human beings, I don't know who these human beings are, believe. And there's a fear. There is a primordial fear that some of the human beings who are anti-intellectual might be some utilitarians in power. Much like whoever is in charge of Yorha, which is the organization which is supposed to be protecting humankind, but may very well have betrayed it at some point over several thousand years. So, I don't seriously think, I can't bring myself to seriously think that the developers of such a subtle and moving game would have meant it as a satire. I don't even see how that would be practical for them if they were utilitarians. Because like I said, while you can see the value of someone like Jean-Paul from the standpoint of any philosophical school other than utilitarianism, or at least anyone that I can think of, any one of the major ones, as an agent of truth, as a light in the dark, as the wise old man. While you can, I mean, even though he's kind of corny, while you can see that, it's hard to see what utilitarian purpose he serves in a utilitarian worldview. Because even as a satire of intellectualism, it just wouldn't work. Because people respect intellectuals too much as human beings. And that is a part of our existence that does seem to be predetermined and essential to us. We wouldn't be asking questions of existence in essence if that were not the case. And we've been asking them for thousands of years throughout various cultures throughout the world. Non-pretentiously at that. So, since a true utilitarian wouldn't have written this character in, because it wouldn't have had any utilitarian purpose except as a futile and obsolete sort of satire, a vestige of 20th century fascism, no, I think I'm curious to see how his ideas are applied throughout the game. Maybe not through his voice directly, but it is a little funny, at least, that, from the perspective of maybe a Sartrean or even just someone who studied him and has seen him as a father figure, to think that to be is so utilitarian that she just doesn't even get it. But I think that's one of the things that as she develops as a character, we'll see a change. And hopefully, depending on my decisions that I make, because this is a decision-based game, we'll find a better essence for her existence. So thank you.